Imagine experiencing something so terrifying, so profoundly disturbing, that your first instinct is to call the police, only to discover they're just as powerless as you are. Tonight, you're about to hear 3 true stories of unimaginable horror where calling for help wasn't enough, because help simply didn't exist. First, step into apartment 23, where late-night whispers become screams, and scratching behind the walls reveals a terrifying secret hidden for decades. But when the police arrive, they discover nothing. What, or who, is truly trapped inside those walls. Then journey with a mother and daughter desperate to escape a chilling presence known only as the listener. Their frantic pleas to law enforcement end in disbelief and silence. But how do you escape something no one else believes exists? Finally, join a man who inherits Cabin 9 at Lake Pinecrest, only to uncover dark memories he'd long buried. When authorities dismiss his frantic calls as paranoia, he realizes the truth. No one ever leaves Cabin 9 alive. 3 stories, each more disturbing than the last, all proving one horrifying truth. Sometimes, even the police can't save you. Turn down the lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't call for help. It won't matter. Story 1. The Silence in Apartment 23. When I first moved into Ashwood Apartments, I thought it was the fresh start I needed. A modest complex on the outskirts of town, affordable and quiet. The kind of place where neighbors nodded politely but kept to themselves. Apartment 23 was on the top floor, tucked into the corner overlooking a dense patch of woods. Peaceful, isolated, and exactly what I needed after the chaos of my divorce. It took only 3 nights for me to realize that something about Apartment 23 wasn't quite right. The first sign came subtly, a faint tapping sound in the wall behind my bed. I dismissed it as plumbing, or maybe squirrels. Old buildings had their quirks. But on the 4th night, the tapping turned into scratching, rhythmic, insistent, and impossible to sleep through. I reported it to the building superintendent, an older man named Carl with sagging eyes and stained overalls. He checked around, shook his head, and said there was nothing there. I pressed him about pests, maybe mice or rats. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Ma'am, I've worked here 16 years, and Apartment 23 is the quietest unit we have. Nobody's ever reported pests or noise." His confidence unsettled me, but he promised to set traps just to ease my nerves. The next morning, every trap was untouched, but that night, the scratching returned, louder, more deliberate. It followed me from room to room. I'd leave the bedroom, and it would continue behind the bathroom mirror. I'd flee to the kitchen, and it would crawl behind the cabinets, taunting me. By the weekend, sleep was a distant memory. Shadows under my eyes. I met my next-door neighbor, Paula, while retrieving my mail. She was middle-aged, soft-spoken, with weary eyes hidden behind thick glasses. "You look exhausted," she noted gently. "There's this scratching in my walls," I confessed. "It's driving me insane." Paula paled slightly. "Scratching?" She glanced away, uncomfortable. "You've heard it too?" She hesitated before finally whispering. "The last tenant said something similar. He moved out suddenly, said he couldn't take the noise anymore." "What noise?" "Scratching, whispers, voices." She lowered her voice further. Apartment 23 sat empty for almost a year after him. A chill rolled down my spine. "Why didn't Carl mention this?" Paula shrugged nervously. "Carl doesn't like trouble. He'd rather pretend problems don't exist. It's easier." Determined to confront Carl again, I marched downstairs. He was repainting the lobby walls, But when I confronted him about the previous tenant, he dropped his paintbrush, paint splattering his boots. "Ms. Hart," he warned, "some questions aren't worth asking." "Why didn't you tell me about the last tenant?" He hesitated, glancing around to ensure we were alone. "Listen, apartment 23. Some things can't be fixed. You understand?" "No, I don't." He leaned in, voice harsh and low. "The guy before you said he heard voices, that something was in the walls. Police came, checked everything, found nothing. No rodents, no intruders, just silence. They chalked it up to paranoia. But just leave it alone," he snapped. "Trust me." That night, the scratching intensified. I lay awake, covers pulled tight around my chin, staring at the ceiling. At exactly 2:43 a.m., the scratching stopped, replaced by silence. A heavy, unnatural silence. Then I heard it. A whisper, soft, breathy, indistinct, slipping through cracks and seams, floating from nowhere, yet everywhere. I sat up, heart hammering. "Who's there?" The whisper ceased immediately, replaced by a gentle laugh. A woman's laugh. Familiar, yet impossible to place. I jumped from bed, flicking on every light. The room was empty, yet I could still feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. I called the police. 2 officers arrived, skeptical but thorough. They knocked on walls, checked windows and closets. They found nothing. "Maybe you're stressed, ma'am," Officer Walters offered politely. I protested. "I heard someone. I heard her laugh." They exchanged glances. "Do you have anyone you can stay with?" Feeling defeated, I shook my head. "I just moved here." After they left, silence returned, deeper and more oppressive. But as dawn approached, I managed to drift into restless sleep. I woke hours later to a pounding on my door. Paula stood outside, eyes red-rimmed and frantic. Something happened, something terrible. I followed her downstairs, joining a small cluster of residents gathered around Carl's apartment door. Police tape sealed the doorway. Officer Walters saw me approaching and stepped forward to meet me. "Carl's dead," he announced grimly. "He fell from his balcony last night." I stared, disbelieving. "Fell?" He hesitated, troubled. There were scratch marks on his balcony rail. Deep marks, like he was trying desperately to hold on. Chilled, I whispered, "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he began slowly, glancing back at the gathered residents, "that the marks matched the descriptions of the noises you reported. But we found nothing. No intruder, no weapon, nothing." Paula clutched my arm. "It got him. Whatever it is, it got him." Later that day, unable to shake the image of Carl's desperate grip, I researched Ashwood Apartments at the library. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. 50 years prior, a young woman named Madeline Burke vanished from apartment 23 without a trace. The case was never solved, and police gave up quickly, citing a lack of evidence. As I read the microfilm, dread pooled in my stomach. Madeline Burke had been described as quiet, withdrawn, and oddly fearful in the weeks leading to her disappearance. Neighbors reported hearing scratching and whispering sounds before she vanished. Madeline's photo made my blood run cold. She wore glasses similar to Paula's and had eyes tired beyond her years. I raced home, heart thundering. As I unlocked my apartment, I sensed movement behind me. It was Paula, standing quietly in the shadows. "You found her, didn't you?" she asked gently. I swallowed. "Did you know?" Paula hesitated, then nodded sadly. "People here have always known. Apartment 23 has always been hers. But the police, they couldn't help her. They couldn't help Carl." Her voice lowered. "They won't help you." I backed away, fear gnawing at me. What does she want? Paula's eyes filled with sorrow. to not be forgotten. That night, sleep was impossible. The whispering intensified, becoming a constant, pleading hum. Remember, remember. Then suddenly, silence. I turned in bed, breathing shallow. A figure stood at the foot of my bed, obscured by darkness. My heart froze. Madeline? It stepped forward, moonlight revealing a face distorted by sorrow and rage. It wasn't Madeline. It was Carl, and he was reaching for me. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the headboard as Carl stood motionless at the foot of my bed. He looked as he always had. Gray coveralls stained with paint, thin hair plastered to his forehead, tired eyes now glassy and distant. Yet something about him felt profoundly wrong. The air around him shimmered subtly, like heat radiating from asphalt in summer. But the room was cold, so cold, my breath misted before me. Carl. My voice trembled, barely more than a whisper. He didn't answer. He simply watched me, eyes empty of recognition, head tilted, at an unnatural angle. Slowly he raised one hand and pointed toward the wall behind me. I followed his finger, heart pounding. Nothing but the same blank wall. Yet when I turned back, Carl had moved closer without making a single sound. His face was mere inches from mine now, his expression twisting into something resembling agony. "Help me," he mouthed silently, lips forming the words without any sound escaping. "How?" My voice cracked. "What do you want?" He lifted his other hand, shaking, and mimed a frantic scratching motion in the air. I watched helplessly, my stomach knotting with dread. "Is it Madeline?" I whispered, desperate for answers. "Is she here?" At the mention of her name, his eyes widened, filled suddenly with raw terror. He spun toward the wall again, pointing frantically now, panic clear on his face. And then, as abruptly as he'd appeared, Carl faded, dissolving into the darkness like smoke dispersing into air. I gasped, my lungs aching as I realized I'd been holding my breath. The room warmed slightly, the oppressive chill dissipating along with Carl's presence. But the silence that replaced him was somehow even worse. Heavy, expectant, waiting. I stumbled from my bed, flicking on every light I could find. Each shadow felt hostile, each corner suspect. Finally, I stopped by the wall Carl had indicated, pressing my ear to it. Nothing. I reached out and placed my palm flat against the paint. Then I felt it. A faint, rhythmic vibration, soft, almost undetectable, pulsing beneath the surface. "Carl," I whispered tentatively. No response, only the steady rhythmic beat beneath my fingertips. A heartbeat. Shuddering, I yanked my hand away and stumbled back, grabbing my phone off the bedside table and dialing Paula's number. She answered immediately, her voice heavy with sleep. "Hello? What happened?" "Carl," I managed. "Carl was here, in my apartment. He showed me something, a heartbeat inside my wall." Silence for a beat. "I'm coming over." Paula arrived within minutes, her robe hastily tied around her pajamas, hair tangled, worry etched on her face. She stood silently in my bedroom, staring at the wall. "This is the wall?" she asked, voice hushed. I nodded. It felt like a heartbeat. She moved closer, pressing her ear to the plaster, then jerked back sharply. "There's something moving in there," she whispered. Her eyes met mine, terrified. "Something alive. What do we do?" She hesitated, her breath hitching. "We call the police again." "They won't believe us," I insisted, desperation mounting. "They didn't before." "We have to try," Paula said firmly. "Maybe they will at least break open the wall. Maybe there's something behind it, an animal, something stuck. They can't ignore that." But deep down, we both knew it wasn't an animal. The thought hung heavily between us, unspoken but understood. Officers Walters and Jacobs arrived quickly, irritation clear in their movements, but seeing Paula's anxious face and my pale, haunted expression, they softened slightly. "You said Carl was here?" Walters asked carefully, eyeing my disheveled appearance with skepticism. I nodded. I saw him clearly. He was pointing at this wall. Officer Jacobs stepped closer, pressing an ear to the plaster, frowning slightly. "I don't hear anything." "It was there," Paula insisted. "A heartbeat. Something's behind that wall." Jacobs exchanged glances with Walters, uncertainty flickering. Walters sighed heavily. "Fine, we'll check." They fetched tools from their patrol car, reluctantly drilling a small hole into the plaster. Dust clouded the room, making me cough, and when they stepped back, we all peered inside. Nothing. Empty darkness greeted us. Walters shone a flashlight inside, revealing only old wooden framework and insulation. No signs of disturbance. No animal trapped inside. "See?" Walters muttered tiredly. "There's nothing here." My heart sank, but as the officers packed up their tools, Paula whispered sharply, "Wait! What's that?" She pointed to the edge of the hole, where something pale gleamed against the wood. Officer Jacobs leaned in again, using a penlight to examine it closer. "What is it?" Walters asked impatiently. Jacobs hesitated. Looks like scratches, like someone tried clawing through here." A chill raced down my spine. Walters peered closer, expression hardening. "The insulation's torn. Looks deliberate." He turned back to me, suspicion darkening his face. "Did you do this?" "No," I protested, stepping back instinctively. "Why would I?" Jacobs raised a calming hand. "Hold on, Walters. Look closer." He used tweezers to extract something small and pale caught on the rough wood edge. A fingernail. Someone was trapped behind here. Jacobs whispered grimly. A heavy silence filled the room. Walters stared at the tiny fragment, eyes wide with disbelief. "But that's impossible. There's no room back there. It's just insulation and studs." Jacobs didn't reply, his expression unsettled. "We need to bring forensics. Maybe we missed something." As they left to call for backup, Paula turned to me, her face ghostly pale. "Madeline. It has to be Madeline." My stomach churned. "Do you think she was buried behind the wall?" Paula shook her head slowly. "Not buried. Imprisoned." Forensics came later, tearing down large portions of the wall, revealing nothing but empty space, insulation, and wood. No evidence of human remains. No indication anyone had ever been trapped. Eventually they left, baffled and frustrated, promising to file a report that would surely be buried and forgotten. I couldn't stay in apartment 23 another night. Paula insisted I sleep on her couch, and I gratefully accepted, too shaken to refuse. Exhausted, I finally drifted into a restless sleep. I woke in the early hours, sensing I wasn't alone. The room was shadowed, Paula's gentle breathing coming from her bedroom. But standing near the doorway was Carl, his face contorted in grief. Behind him stood a woman, slender, pale, eyes dark as night. Madeline. Her mouth opened, whispering soundlessly, but I understood clearly. "You found me, but you can't help me. No one can." Then she smiled softly, pointing to the wall behind me. I turned sharply. The wall trembled. Scratching filled the room again, deafening now. Paula ran from her room, screaming. As we watched, claw marks appeared, gouging into plaster, forming a desperate message. "He's still here." My blood froze. Paula clutched me, voice shaking. Who's still here?" But I already knew. The lights flickered. In the brief darkness I saw him. A tall man stood behind Madeline, his face a dark mask, eyes empty pits, Grinning with predatory satisfaction, Madeline sobbed silently. The man stepped forward, reaching out to us, and whispered clearly this time, voice deep and rough, "You found her, but no one ever finds me." Then, darkness swallowed the room, leaving us screaming, helpless, and alone. The police could tear down every wall, search every corner, but they'd never find him. He was always there, hidden deeper than walls or foundations. In apartment 23, some things stayed hidden forever. Story 2, The Listener. When my mother first bought the old house on Cedar Lane, we thought we'd finally found peace, a fresh start, a chance to rebuild after losing Dad. But peace never came, not even for a single night. The house was Victorian, impressive and somewhat decrepit, with faded paint and ivy creeping over its shadowy facade. Locals called it charming. I saw something different from day one, a quiet menace in its high arches and narrow windows. Yet I convinced myself I was imagining things. The first night, Mom went to bed early, exhausted from unpacking. I lingered downstairs, exploring dusty rooms lit only by a single dim lamp. I ended up in the library, a cramped room filled floor to ceiling with faded, musty books. A fireplace dominated one wall, and I sat near it, leafing idly through a book left open on a table. At midnight exactly, the quiet hum of the house shifted suddenly. The soft creaking of old wood gave way to something else. A whisper. "Who's there?" I asked sharply, standing up, book falling from my lap. Silence, then a faint mocking laugh. I rushed upstairs to Mom, waking her gently. "Did you hear that?" She rubbed her eyes. "Hear what, honey?" A whisper, a laugh. It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. She frowned, clearly thinking I'd imagined it. "This old house creaks. We'll get used to it." I wanted to argue, but her eyes were heavy with grief and exhaustion, so I retreated to my room. Yet sleep evaded me, replaced instead by the memory of that whisper, a voice so soft it could have been mistaken for imagination if not for the chill it left crawling over my skin. Over the next few days, we settled into uneasy routines. The house remained oddly quiet during daylight hours, offering only subtle hints of discomfort. A cold spot here, a shadow moving slightly out of sight there. But at night the whispers returned, persistent, subtle, impossible to ignore. I tried telling Mom again, but each time she brushed it off, attributing my fears to grief, stress, or my overly vivid imagination. That changed one rainy evening. I was in the library again, attempting homework, when Mom entered, her face pale. "Have you seen my keys?" "No," I replied absently, still focused on algebra equations. "Did you check the kitchen?" "They were on my bedside table," she said slowly, eyes troubled. "I just turned around, and they were gone." A sound interrupted us, a quiet metallic jingle, that distant, but distinct. My blood ran cold. Mom's eyes widened. "Did you hear?" "Yes," I whispered, heart racing. "Upstairs?" She nodded slowly. We ascended the staircase together, floorboards protesting under our cautious footsteps. At the landing, the sound intensified, now clearly the jingling of keys, accompanied by gentle footsteps. "Hello?" Mom's voice trembled slightly, gripping the banister tightly. "Whoever's here, show yourself." The jingling stopped abruptly. Then silence. After an agonizing pause, we pushed forward into Mom's room, empty, no keys, no signs of disturbance. "I'm calling the police," Mom announced finally, voice shaking. The officers arrived promptly. They searched every room thoroughly, offering skeptical but polite reassurance. "Probably the wind," Officer Kent murmured, his expression bored and indifferent. "But the keys?" Mom insisted. Kent shrugged. Sometimes we misplace things. They'll turn up. Big old houses play tricks. We felt foolish, thanked them stiffly, and watched them drive away. No sooner had their cruiser disappeared from sight than the house shifted once more. This time, the whispers were clearer, almost laughing. "You hear it now, right?" I asked, desperation coloring my voice. "Yes," Mom whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "Someone's here." But no matter how many times we called the police after that, they never found anything. Every search ended the same: confused looks, half-hearted reassurances, and dismissals. Eventually, the police stopped answering our calls, labeling us in hushed tones as the paranoid newcomers. We were alone, and whatever lived in that house knew it. Each passing night, the presence grew bolder. Objects vanished, only to reappear days later in strange places. Footsteps paced outside bedroom doors, whispers filtered through vents, and once the piano downstairs played a soft, mocking melody, though neither of us had touched it. One evening I arrived home from school to find Mom sitting rigid at the kitchen table, pale and silent. She was staring at the pantry door. "What is it?" I asked nervously. She nodded toward the pantry. "It moved," she whispered. "What moved?" "The door," she breathed, voice trembling. "Watch." We both stood frozen, eyes locked on the pantry door. Seconds ticked by, agonizingly slow. I began doubting her. Maybe grief had truly gotten the best of us both. Then, with a soft, deliberate creak, the pantry door swung open several inches before slamming shut again. We both screamed, clutching each other. That night, Mom decided enough was enough. "We're leaving tomorrow," she announced firmly. "We'll stay at Aunt Clara's." Relief flooded me. Finally. But sleep eluded me again. I tossed and turned, nerves frayed. At midnight exactly, a voice whispered clearly beside my ear. Leaving so soon, I jolted upright, breathless. A dark shadow loomed by my door, watching silently. It stepped closer, moonlight revealing pale, ghostly features. An unfamiliar face, thin, gaunt, empty eyes, fixed upon me with cold amusement. "I've enjoyed our little games," the figure whispered, voice ragged yet calm. "But it's time you learned my rules." Paralyzed, I stared helplessly. "Who are you?" "I'm the listener," he replied softly, stepping back into the shadows. "And I'm always here." He vanished, leaving me trembling. I rushed to Mom's room, shaking her awake. "He spoke to me," I cried. "We have to leave now." Her eyes fluttered open, confused. "What are you?" But her voice cut off abruptly, eyes widening in terror. She stared past me, to something behind my shoulder. I spun around slowly. The listener stood silently, smiling softly in the corner, a darkness seeping around him like ink. "Tell her," he whispered mockingly. "Tell her how no one can help you." We ran. Barefoot, desperate, we fled outside into the rain, stumbling toward the road. Mom called the police again, pleading desperately, sobbing into the phone. But when they arrived, they found nothing. No listener, no signs of entry, no evidence at all. "Ma'am," Officer Kent said gently but firmly, eyes filled with pity, "we can't help if there's nothing there." Mom sank to her knees on the pavement, hopeless and defeated. We never returned to Cedar Lane. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is silent and shadows seem alive, I swear I still hear him whispering in my dreams. "I'm the listener, and no one can help you." We stayed at Aunt Clara's, temporarily sheltered by family but feeling far from safe. The house on Cedar Lane now stood empty, yet somehow its shadow reached out, stretching over our lives no matter where we ran. Even with a new address, we couldn't escape what we'd heard. and seen. Aunt Clara was sympathetic but skeptical. She offered reassurances like everyone else had, that the stress of grief played tricks on us. She suggested therapists, herbal tea, and even sage to cleanse our lingering anxieties. I nodded politely, humoring her suggestions, but Mom was different. She sat quietly, eyes distant, haunted by the echoes of the listener's voice. Within days, her demeanor changed. Mom became withdrawn and tense, startled by noises I could not hear, staring fearfully into darkened rooms. Each night, she triple-checked doors and windows, clutching a rosary tightly in her fist, murmuring quiet prayers as tears silently rolled down her cheeks. One afternoon she stood abruptly, dropping a coffee cup that shattered at her feet, her eyes fixed on something invisible in the hallway behind me. "Mom?" I asked gently. "Are you okay?" She whispered faintly, "He's here." My heart thundered. I turned slowly, terrified, but saw nothing, just empty space and dim light. Yet her eyes widened further, fixed on something tangible only to her. "What do you see?" I asked urgently. "The listener," she gasped. "He followed us." Aunt Clara rushed in, confused and concerned. She placed a comforting hand on Mom's shoulder. "There's no one here, sweetheart. You're safe." But Mom jerked away, panic surging. "You don't see him, standing right there watching us, smiling?" "Mom," I pleaded softly, guiding her away gently. "Come sit, please." Her shoulders trembled under my touch. She turned to me desperately. "You believe me, don't you?" I hesitated, but the pain in her eyes was undeniable. "I believe you." That night Aunt Clara slept soundly down the hall, while Mom and I sat awake, holding each other close in the dim glow of a bedside lamp. Mom stared blankly at the doorway, every muscle tense. The silence around us was thick and suffocating. Hours crept by. Then, just as sleep threatened to claim me, Mom squeezed my arm painfully. "Listen." I strained my ears and felt the chill of dread as faint laughter floated from somewhere far too close. He was here. We turned together, terrified, and saw him clearly. The listener stood in the doorway, smiling calmly. His pale face seemed almost transparent, shadowy veins beneath his skin illuminated grotesquely in the dim lamplight. "What do you want from us?" Mom's voice quivered. He cocked his head slightly, voice soft and gentle, yet somehow mocking. "I want what everyone wants, to be heard, to never be forgotten." "Leave us alone," I shouted. "We never did anything to you." His smile widened impossibly. "But you listened? Once heard, I cannot be unheard. You carry me with you, always." Mom sobbed softly, head bowed, whispering quiet prayers. He glanced at her, lips curling with mild amusement. "You can pray all you like, but I've been here longer than your faith, longer than your family. I am the whisper behind every closed door. I am the silence that screams louder than noise. I've always been here." Then, as abruptly as he appeared, he faded away, leaving only echoes of his laughter reverberating through our bones. The following morning, Aunt Clara found us packing frantically. "What are you doing?" "We have to leave," Mom whispered. "He won't stop." Aunt Clara blocked our way, confused and angry. "Who won't stop? What's going on?" Mom stared desperately into Clara's skeptical eyes. "The listener. He'll never stop." Clara's expression softened, pity creeping into her voice. "Sweetheart, please, let's get you help." But Mom shook her head, eyes filling with grief. "No one can help." We moved again, this time to a cramped apartment in the city, hidden amidst crowds and noise. Mom began seeing therapists, prescribed medications, anything to quiet the whispers that chased her everywhere. For weeks it seemed to help. We adjusted, cautiously optimistic, starting to believe we'd finally left him behind. But the listener had not forgotten us. One cold night, I awoke sharply from a nightmare. Immediately my chest tightened with dread. Silence filled my small room, but it felt wrong, charged with malevolent anticipation. My heart pounded. "Mom?" No answer. I crept to her room, the floorboards icy beneath my feet. I pushed open her door gently, whispering again, "Mom?" Her bed was empty, sheets tossed aside, the room vacant. Panicked, I raced downstairs, calling her name, frantically searching, and then I saw her. Mom stood frozen at the living room window, staring into the darkness outside. She didn't respond as I touched her shoulder gently. Her face was drained of color, eyes wide in terror, fixed upon something I couldn't see. Then she spoke in a voice that wasn't entirely her own, low and distant. "He's calling me." "Mom, please," I begged, gripping her shoulders. "Come away." She resisted gently, shaking her head slowly. "He won't leave us alone unless I go." "Go where?" "To him," she breathed, pointing into the night. I followed her gaze outside, nothing but shadows and emptiness. Then her expression shifted sharply from fear to a quiet calm. She turned and smiled gently at me, heartbreakingly peaceful. "I'll make him stop. For you." My stomach twisted with horror. "Mom, don't." But she stepped away before I could react, calmly walking to the front door, opening it, and stepping into the freezing night. I chased after her, my bare feet sliding on frosted pavement. She moved with unnatural ease toward a cluster of trees at the park across the street. Moonlight bathed her in pale glow as she disappeared into the shadows. I ran faster, crying out her name, my voice breaking in desperation. I reached the tree line and halted, horror paralyzing me. She stood quietly at the edge of a clearing, hands by her sides. In front of her stood the listener. His form wavered slightly, distorted, elongated, something far older and more monstrous than the figure we'd seen before. "Let her go," I shouted, trembling. "Take me instead." He turned slowly, regarding me with mild curiosity. "She's already mine. She hears me clearly." Mom turned to me, eyes glassy, serene. "He promised to let you go if I stayed." "No," I sobbed, heart shattering. "Please, Mom." She smiled once more, heartbreakingly gentle. "Don't listen, sweetheart. Promise you'll never listen." Before I could reply, darkness surged forward, swirling around them both, obscuring everything. I lunged forward, screaming, reaching blindly, but the clearing was empty. Mom was gone. The listener was gone. In the weeks that followed, police searched relentlessly. They found no trace, no evidence, just like before. Eventually, her disappearance was filed away, another unresolved case lost in bureaucratic indifference. I've moved again since then, always running, always hoping. But I know the truth. No matter where I go, I still hear him, whispering softly, patiently, waiting. I never listen. I never respond. But he's still here. The listener is always here. Story 3. No One Lives in Cabin 9. I never intended to revisit Lake Pinecrest. Some memories should remain untouched, hidden away in the back of our minds, safe from the harsh light of adulthood. But when I inherited the cabin from my estranged uncle, a man I barely remembered, my childhood summers at Pinecrest suddenly forced their way back into my life, along with a shadow I'd tried to forget. I hadn't been there since I was 12, but the place had barely changed. As I drove through the familiar winding roads, nostalgia collided with an unsettling dread. It was late June, and Lake Pinecrest sat quiet and remote, far removed from civilization's comforting lights. My uncle's cabin, number 9, stood at the edge of the property, isolated among towering pines that cast long, ominous shadows. The groundskeeper, an older man named Earl, met me at the property entrance, his face weathered from years spent in solitude. He glanced suspiciously at the key in my hand. "Cabin 9, huh?" he said, eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "Is there a problem?" He hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "It's just, we don't usually rent out number 9. Your uncle, he didn't stay there for years. He left it boarded up." My stomach tightened. "Why?" Earl glanced away, uncomfortable. "You should choose another cabin, anything but 9 inches. I forced a polite smile. "It's mine now. Family property. Can't avoid it forever." He sighed heavily, handing me a worn map. "Suit yourself. Just be careful. Sometimes old places hold on to things. Memories, secrets, sometimes worse." I watched him leave, his words settling like ice in my chest. But I'd driven too far to turn around. Gathering courage, I climbed back into my car and drove slowly along the gravel path, stopping when cabin number 9 came into view. It stood half hidden by overgrowth, walls peeling, windows clouded by grime and neglect. I stepped out, boots crunching loudly over dry pine needles. As I reached the porch, the faint scent of decay hit me, mixing with pine and mold. The cabin seemed to watch me silently, accusingly. I unlocked the front door, pushing it open slowly. The air inside was stale and heavy, shadows clinging stubbornly to corners despite the fading daylight. Furniture lay covered in white sheets, their shapes ghostly beneath the draped fabric. Everything was untouched, frozen in time. I pulled sheets away, coughing at clouds of dust. Beneath were remnants of my uncle's life. Faded photographs, fishing gear, hunting trophies covered in grime. Each item a story I would never fully know. As night fell, I lit a fire in the stone fireplace, determined to make the most of this strange inheritance. Flames danced gently, casting flickering shadows that danced across the cabin walls. But despite the warmth, a creeping unease began settling in my chest. Outside, the forest lay silent. Too silent. No animal sounds, no breeze whispering through the trees. It felt as though the world around cabin 9 was holding its breath, watching me. I cooked a quick meal, distracted and uneasy. As I cleaned up, a soft sound broke through the silence. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching softly along the gravel path outside. My heart thumped painfully. "Hello?" I called nervously, glancing through the window. No response. Only shadows shifting among the trees. I tried convincing myself it was Earl or another visitor, but my gut twisted anxiously. Locking doors and windows, I retreated to the bedroom, exhausted yet restless. Sleep eluded me, replaced by fragmented dreams of whispers in the dark and unseen figures lurking just out of sight. Just before dawn, I woke abruptly to silence, oppressive and unnatural. Then came a single deliberate knock on the front door. My breath caught in my throat. I stood slowly, heart hammering, and peered cautiously through the small window near the door. No one there. My fingers trembled as I unlocked and opened the door, staring into emptiness. I stepped onto the porch, scanning the area. Nothing but trees and shadow. But as I turned back inside, my eyes fell on something lying at my feet. A small wooden carving, about the size of my hand, shaped like a stag. Its surface was worn smooth, polished by years of handling. The carving was familiar. I'd seen it before. Long ago, as a child, right here at Pinecrest. My heart thundered with recognition and dread. Memories came flooding back, dark and urgent. A summer I'd spent at cabin 9 with my uncle, shortly after my father's death. An afternoon by the lake, my uncle fishing silently. And that carving held by a quiet, strange boy I'd seen wandering near the water's edge. He'd looked pale, distant, eyes hollow with sadness. My uncle had grabbed me sharply, pulling me away. "Don't talk to him," he'd snapped harshly. "That boy isn't right." I'd never forgotten the boy's face, his pale features, his sorrowful eyes. Nor had I forgotten his whispered warning. "This place takes things. People, you shouldn't stay." Shaking, I picked up the carving, turning it slowly in my hand. Why had this appeared now, decades later? A voice startled me, soft and young, drifting from somewhere deep in the forest. "You came back." I spun sharply, scanning the trees frantically. "Who's there?" Silence again. My skin prickled. "Show yourself." From the shadows the boy stepped forward. He was exactly as I remembered, unchanged by years, still pale, young, eyes large and impossibly sad. "Who are you?" I whispered, throat tight. His gaze fixed on mine, solemn. "You know who I am. You saw me before, by the lake." "That's impossible. You haven't aged." He shook his head slowly. "Time doesn't matter here." "What do you mean?" He glanced toward the cabin, face haunted. "Cabin 9. It keeps us. It won't let go." Cold dread seeped through my veins. "What are you saying?" He stepped closer, eyes intense. "Your uncle tried to leave once, but you can't run from Cabin 9. Once you stay here, you belong to it." "My uncle died somewhere else," I argued desperately. He shook his head again, face filled with sadness. "He thought he'd escaped, but when he died, they found him here, on this porch." My stomach churned violently. "That's not true." "That's what they told you. They covered it up. The police couldn't help. They never can." I stepped back, trembling. "Why are you telling me this?" He reached out slowly, touching the carving in my hand. "Because you're next. Unless you leave. Right now." I stared into his sorrowful eyes. "What happened to you?" He glanced away, voice fading. "I came here, like you, looking for answers. I never left." The forest grew darker, colder, suffocating. He stepped backward, fading into shadows. "Don't stay," he whispered. "If you do, no one can help you." He vanished into darkness, leaving only silence behind. Shaking violently, I turned back toward Cabin 9, heart filled with terror. But as I stepped onto the porch, I froze. A figure stood inside, silhouetted against the firelight. It raised one hand slowly, beckoning me forward. Paralyzed, I realized with chilling certainty I was already too late. Fear locked me in place as I stared into Cabin 9, my heart racing like a trapped animal. The figure stood perfectly still, backlit by the flickering fire, arm outstretched, silent, patient, waiting, an invitation, or perhaps a command. I felt helplessly drawn toward it, even as my instincts screamed to flee. "Who are you?" My voice was barely a whisper, my throat tight with terror. No response, just the soft crackling of the fireplace behind it, echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. I stepped onto the porch, feet feeling heavy as if weighed down by chains. Each step was a struggle against invisible restraints. When I reached the doorway, the figure moved backward, smoothly retreating into the shadowy depths of the room. Slowly, painfully, I followed, stepping inside. The door creaked shut behind me, sealing me in darkness, cut only by the dim glow of dying embers. My pulse quickened, every nerve in my body screaming warnings I couldn't heed. "Hello?" My voice trembled, barely audible even to myself. Only silence answered. I turned slowly, squinting in the gloom, searching for the figure. Shadows danced across walls, playing tricks on my vision, revealing and concealing shapes that could have been furniture, or something else. My heart nearly stopped when a voice whispered gently behind my ear, close enough to feel a soft breath tickling my skin. You stayed. I spun around, stumbling back, but saw nothing, no one, only shadows and silence. I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding painfully. "Who are you?" I demanded again, voice louder now, though still unsteady. From the corner, a shadow shifted, slowly gaining form. A woman stepped forward, slender and pale, dressed in an old-fashioned gown that whispered softly as she moved. Her face was young, but her eyes carried the weary sorrow of someone far older. "I was the first," she murmured, eyes distant, fixed beyond me. "Long before your uncle, long before anyone remembered this place, I lived here." "You're a ghost," I breathed, hardly believing my own words. She smiled gently, sadly. "Call me what you wish. I've been here so long, I don't remember anything else." "What do you want from me?" Her gaze sharpened slightly, suddenly intense. "It's not me who wants something." My blood ran cold. "Who, then?" She glanced toward the door behind me, her expression shifting to fear. "The listener." My breath hitched sharply. "The listener?" She nodded slowly. "He controls this place, feeds on sorrow, loneliness, desperation. He takes people and keeps them. Like you," I whispered, dread settling heavily inside me. "Yes," she replied softly, voice trembling. "And soon, you too, unless you leave now." My legs wobbled beneath me, panic rising. But the boy, the one I saw, he said it was already too late. Her eyes darkened sadly. Perhaps he was right. She began fading, her form dissolving gently into shadows. "I wish I could help you, but no one leaves once they've seen him." Then she was gone, leaving me alone, the room colder than before. I rushed to the door, wrenching the handle desperately, but it wouldn't budge. I pounded on the wood, shouting for help until my voice cracked. Finally, exhausted, I collapsed onto the floor, shivering and breathless. A new voice drifted softly through the darkness. "You can shout all night. They won't hear you." The listener stepped forward, slowly emerging from the shadows. His appearance shifted subtly, never settling into something clear, features melting and reforming continually, as if he had no true face of his own. But his eyes remained constant, dark, bottomless, void of any compassion or warmth. "Let me go," I pleaded weakly. "Please." He tilted his head curiously. "But you came willingly. You returned." "This was a mistake," I stammered, voice shaking. "Just let me leave, please." "People don't just leave," he interrupted gently, voice calm yet deeply chilling. "They disappear, they fade, but they don't leave." He stepped closer, the air around him rippling strangely, bending and distorting. "You remember your uncle, don't you?" "Yes," I whispered, fighting back tears. "He died far from here." A slow, predatory smile crossed his shifting face. "Did he?" The listener gestured slowly toward the wall beside the fireplace. The wood began rippling unnaturally, melting away like liquid wax, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside sat a figure, silent and still, slumped in a dusty armchair. My uncle, exactly as I'd remembered him from childhood, face pale, eyes closed as if sleeping. I choked back a sob. "No, it can't be." "He never left," the listener whispered, voice soothing yet merciless. "None of them ever left." The wall shifted again, further revealing a hidden space extending deeper into the cabin. Dozens of figures sat quietly inside, frozen, preserved, eternally waiting. My vision blurred with tears as recognition hit me, faces of missing people, long forgotten, their stories lost to time, now trapped here forever. "I won't become like them," I gasped, heart pounding. "I won't let you keep me." His laughter filled the room, helldessel yet mocking. "You're already mine." Summoning every ounce of strength, I bolted forward, smashing into the listener, feeling him dissolve around me like smoke, cold and suffocating. I stumbled toward the door again, frantically clawing at it. This time it opened, and I crashed onto the porch, gasping for air. I scrambled away, falling to my knees at the foot of the stairs, lungs burning, desperate for freedom. But as I glanced back at Cabin 9, dread overwhelmed me. I stood motionless in the window, staring down at myself with hollow eyes. It was me, my face, my body, trapped inside, calmly watching from behind glass. "No," I whispered, horror gripping me. The listener stepped beside my duplicate self, placing a gentle hand on its shoulder. "You can't run from yourself." I turned, racing toward the road, heart hammering painfully. At the property's edge, a patrol car idled quietly. Officer Kent stood outside, watching me approach, expression sympathetic yet troubled. "Officer, please," I cried desperately. "You have to help me." But he simply shook his head slowly. "We've been looking for you. You disappeared weeks ago." "No," I protested. "I just got here yesterday." He sighed heavily, stepping closer. "We've searched everywhere. There's no Cabin 9, not anymore." I spun around wildly. Pinecrest was empty, silent. No cabins, no lake, nothing but endless trees and shadows. But it was right there. I stammered. Kent placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Listen to me carefully. There's nothing here." His voice shifted slightly, colder, softer, horribly familiar. "Nothing, except me." I jerked back sharply, staring into his eyes now empty pits, face melting away to reveal the listener's shifting form. "You never left the cabin," he whispered gently. "You never could." Reality twisted sharply, blurring around me. I was back inside, sitting quietly in the armchair beside my uncle, eyes wide open, unable to move. Around me sat silent figures, faces blank, waiting endlessly. The listener stepped into view, smiling softly. "Welcome home." I screamed, but no sound escaped. I was here now, forever trapped in Cabin 9, beyond the reach of police, beyond help, beyond hope. Because in this place, police couldn't help. No one could. And there you have it, 3 chilling true stories where calls for help went unanswered, and those meant to protect were helpless themselves. Sometimes the things that haunt us aren't just hidden in shadows or lurking behind locked doors. Sometimes they're right in front of us, daring us to seek help we won't find. If these stories chilled you to the bone, don't forget to hit that like button to let us know, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss another terrifying true story. Have a similar experience, or know someone who has? Share your story below. We're always listening. Stay safe out there, because next time, it might be your call the police can't answer.